Ms. Sillo.
Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon
it's been
to
morning.
the Commission and Commissioners.
I don't like the idea of having to look at the time before I greet somebody. In my language, it doesn't happen. Good morning, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Sillo.
Thank you, Chair. For purposes of the record, just to state, we continue with the testimony of Minister Senzo Mchunu, which started on Tuesday afternoon, the 2nd of December. And because of our programming challenges, Mr. Mchunu was gracious enough to permit us to continue with the witness who was under subpoena for Wednesday, yesterday, and he is back today to complete his testimony. Chair, once again, for the record, when we started with the testimony of Mr. Mchunu, Ms. Lee Sigal Mube was leading her, working with me. There's a slight change in the team today, and it's still myself, but this time I'm with Ms. Tabampuwe, Advocate Tabampuwe. But that should not impact anything at all. It will have no impact on the process. Chair, with your leave, there is something I would like to address. If anything, to correct the public perception that appears to have taken root out there. On Tuesday, when Minister Mchunu presented himself before the commission, he was wearing a hearing aid. And unfortunately, the public has interpreted that in different ways, most of the ways exceptionally incorrect. I would like to place on record that Mr. Mchunu brought to our attention that, as with anyone, he has hearing challenges sometimes. And in order to facilitate engagement between himself and us on the one hand and the commissioners on the other, the commission provided him with a hearing aid that is connected to the commission system to enable audibility or to improve audibility. So that hearing aid that the public may see is not one brought by Minister Mchunu. It has not been provided to him by his legal team or anyone, and it is for no other purpose except to facilitate better hearing by him. So I thought it is necessary to put that on record and clear any misconceptions that may be there out publicly.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
I was about to ask where it is today. I see Mr. Michaels taking it across. You want me to say something to test? Okay. Are you comfortable? Are we ready to proceed, Minister Mchunu?
Very comfortable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mchunu, as the situation was on Tuesday, you should have before you a file containing your statement that you had begun to testify on Tuesday afternoon. And then you have a series of files that are marked, 4 of which were tendered on your behalf together with your statement, and that contains your annexures. And there are 3 other files, and these are marked exhibits. And those are the documents that are being tendered by the commission or by the evidence leaders. As it is practice, as and when we need to refer you to any particular document during the course of your testimony, we will do our best to be as precise as we can and direct you to the correct file and the correct page. So for the moment, you don't have to worry about the fact that you are surrounded by 8 files. We'll find a way to manipulate our way through it, through all that morass. Turning then to your statement, when you left the commission on Tuesday, you had gone as far as page 21. And as per agreement, on Tuesday, you'll be given an opportunity to put across your version, but once again, as regards strictly the issues of the PKTT, and as stated on record, there shall be no engagement with you during that time until you have completed your version. And when I say engagement, it basically is to limit myself. I will not speak on behalf of the commissioners. The commissioners may, as it happened on Tuesday, ask clarification questions as and when it becomes necessary. Considering the time, and on my estimation, you should comfortably conclude that process in the next 1 hour, 30 minutes or so. And I just wanted to check with you whether that is comfortable. I'm not rushing you through the process, am I?
I hope you are not.
Okay. I trust we shall, and we'll attempt to do so. With those few words, then I'd invite you to address the next topic of your statement, starting at page 22.
Thank you very sorry.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, commissioners. Just before I proceed to page 22, I just want to go back a little bit to the comments that were made by Commissioner Khumalo, but very briefly, and the comments that were made by Commissioner Baloyi. Just to say that when Commissioner Khumalo asked me to cast my eye on paragraph 8.10 of the Marai Committee report, I did so. And my reading of the paragraph, or that 8.10 says, task teams, I quote directly, should be subjected to an impact analysis by organizational development and strategic management in the province to ensure the feasibility of existing teams. This was now 2024. They were worried about the state of the teams or some teams in some provinces, and then putting a mechanism for that. So my reading is that it is with reference to the provincial teams, the specialized task teams, and it is common cause that the National Political Killings Task Team is a national task team, and therefore doesn't apply to it. Commissioner Baloyi spoke about the existence of murder and robbery at the time or up to the end of the year 2024, when I wrote the directives in relation to the structure, the new structure that had been developed after we came, to say whether that murder and robbery was in existence or it was still to exist in terms of the new structure. And I do want to confirm that beyond any doubt, even as we negotiated the new structure or discussed the new structure during our orientation and up to the end of the year, the murder and robbery was in full existence, depending on a province here and there, but it was in full existence. And I point us to that as evidence. Even on the 12th of July, during the orientation, the presentation that was made clearly indicated that it does exist. Murder and robbery was already in existence, apart from all other evidential documentation that I've given to you. And of course, even at that meeting, there were comments like the letter was issued at the time when there were discussions in relation to the establishment of murder and robbery. And in the past, there was a unit called Brixton Murder and Robbery Unit, which was dealing with the issues of murder and robbery, and it was doing very well. These were part of the discussions that ensued as we were holding our discussions. But this is an extract from the evidence given by Deputy Minister Matali at the ad hoc committee. It is on paragraph 58. But I do also have this document at my disposal, which is a 2020 structure at the beginning of the previous administration. I don't know whether commissioners have. It clearly, like the one that I was putting, it clearly indicates that the structure, the murder and robbery that we are talking about, did exist in column 3 in this document as a section, as I was explaining, or murder and robbery, and then there are other sections below that. So these are part of the material evidence that show that there was indeed meant to be murder and robbery, and the department was making efforts throughout at officials level to build murder and robbery. That is why even in 2019, as in fact 2018, as just 2 months or 3 months after the establishment of the NPKTT in September, they then commissioned a study, because there was this intention all the time to ensure that you build murder and robbery. Now, the last matter...
Just a second there, Minister.
Yes.
We've just been given...
I was about to address that. We've also been given
documents.
Documents relating to organizational structure, and another one also addressing organizational structure, but that one is dated 2025. To place on record, during the course of lunch, I take it that with the submission of these documents, the minister would like to have them included in the record.
Yes.
We will work with the attorneys to determine whether they are part of an existing annexure or how best to mark them for purposes of the record. And then we shall update the commissioner's files as necessary over the lunch period.
Just a suggestion, perhaps they should go to the minister's annexures file.
Yes.
And then you can just give a letter if they relate to, for example, annexure 22.
Indeed.
Then you have a 22A and whatever else.
We shall do so, but I guess we will have to satisfy ourselves that they are relevant to that particular annexure. Otherwise, we'll have to find them. Yes.
Only if they are, yes.
We definitely will do, Chair.
Thank you. Minister, I interrupted you.
Thank you very much. The last preliminary issue, just before I get to page 22, is just to bring in yet another document on interministerial committees as of February this year, but reflecting the position as we started the new administration. that confirms that the interministerial task team or ministerial committee on political killings doesn't form part of the list that we have on political killings. There are all others, but except that one. And it was on the basis of that understanding when I issued the letter of directives as of 31 December last year that that was the existing position at the time. I now want to proceed, therefore, to page 22.
Sorry, Minister, before you do so, you've accepted my invitation and responded to it. It's the first preliminary point you addressed. Because our proceedings are transcribed, you are responding to a document that appears in file 2 of 5, your annexures on page 201, and it is paragraph 8.10 of the Murray report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Minister, the document you just referenced, just to confirm, is it one of the two that has been submitted, or is that yet another?
It's yet another.
It's yet another. We trust that we'll be provided with copies thereof, and we shall treat it in the same fashion as we do these two. Thank you.
Now, page 22 addresses, which is the next topic, the role of the minister vis-a-vis the role of the National Commissioner. In discharging my ministerial responsibilities as police minister, I have at all times understood the constitutional and strategic framework governing policing, including my authority to determine national policy and to issue directives to the National Commissioner within the framework. And in this regard, I've also made my own personal efforts to intensify my understanding of the environment as appointed to police department. And I want to point out right at the beginning that we dispel the notion that the Minister of Police has no operational, although I put it inside italics, has no operational role whatsoever insofar as police are concerned. It will be remembered, it is solely for that reason that I make that statement. That powers, and there was no civilian and ministerial control over the functions, which resulted in grave abuses of human rights. Our Constitution departs from that particular history and places the police firmly under the public control, and the police reside under a political head for a good reason. That was one of the significant changes from the old era, the apartheid era, to the new era of democracy. And it was meant to, among other things, mitigate against what we had experienced as a nation throughout the apartheid era. Section 206 of the Constitution addresses the political responsibilities for the police service. Subsection 1 therefore states that a member of cabinet must be responsible for policing and must determine national policing policy after consulting the provinces or provincial governments and taking into account the policing needs and priorities of the provinces and determined by the provincial executives. And then section 207 deals with the control of the police service, with subsection 1 and subsection 2 providing as follows. The president, as head of the national executive, must appoint a woman or a man as the National Commissioner of Police Service to control and manage police service. The National Commissioner must exercise control over and manage police service in accordance with the national policing policy and the directions of the cabinet member responsible for policing. So those two sections are very clear in my understanding, and I worked on the basis of what I understood them to mean. Then there's Section 207, which establishes a civilian secretariat and provides for a civilian secretariat for the police service, which must be established by national legislation to function under the direction of cabinet member responsible for policing. So according to the Constitution, Minister has three distinct powers. Firstly, it is to determine national policing policy. The second one, it is the power to direct the National Commissioner when exercising his or her powers in terms of Section 207 of managing and controlling the police service. And then thirdly, the power to direct the civilian secretariat for police, which secretariat must be established by national legislation. The Constitution does not prescribe the content of the national policing policy, and this is left to the minister to determine the content. The policy must, however, take into account the policing needs and priorities of the province. And clearly, the Constitution contemplates the all-encompassing policy that sets the framework for the operations of the police. Now, I just want to indicate that we developed the policing policy in the course of last year, completed it, signed it off, so it is in place. There are other sections that are relevant and are important, and I propose that I don't necessarily go through them one by one. Section 2 and 3 of SAPS Act, and then the Constitution and the SAPS Act, which indeed envisage that the policy and directions of the minister will be enforceable by, in the main, the Secretariat. And also, in paragraph 67, I make reference to the nature of the directions that the minister may issue to the National Commissioner. Now, which I'm saying are not necessarily specified in terms of the content. And of course, other issues that arise in the exercise of power by the minister. Now, I want to proceed to paragraph 68.
Yes.
Therefore, the National Commissioner's operational powers must be exercised in accordance with the directions and policy issued by the minister. This is not surprising, a surprising feature of the Constitution. And at the heart of Chapter 11 of the Constitution is the need to place the police service under the public control by imposing political oversight, as it has happened over time during at the advent of our democracy. This is apparent from various provisions dealing with the police and providing extensive powers to the minister responsible for policing, like Section 206. 1, Section 206(3)(e), 206(8), 207(2), and 207(3), and 208, all those subsections. The National Commissioner has the powers contained in 11(2)(d), and this is an important paragraph in my statement. He has sections. He has powers contained in Section 11(2)(d) of the SAPS Act to organize and reorganize the service into various components or units or even groups. But that power contained in 11.2D is not relevant to the issue of the National Political Killings Task Team, because this team was not established by the commissioner in terms of those powers at 11.2D. I have indicated above that this was solely established through the intervention of the president and then who established then the interministerial committee chaired by the police minister, and then who then decided that there should be a structure or a mechanism called a political killings task team. Now, in the light of this framework, my oversight of high-level structural and governance issues, including a 2019 work study, proliferation of unmonitored task teams, budget effects of temporal structures, and the proper location of specialized functions within SAPS fell squarely within my constitutional responsibility. My directive of 31st December 2024 must be assessed with this constitutional and statutory framework. The allegation of overreach is rejected. Now, paragraph 71, during the latter half of 2024, so before I go to that, not only did I believe that as I wrote that directive, I was within the Constitution and the legislative framework, but I did consult a special advisor, Advocate Vusi Piccoli, who then indicated comfort in terms of the exercise of that responsibility based on what is indicated by the Constitution and by the legislative framework.
Sorry, can I just clarify this? The consultation with Advocate Piccoli, was it on the day or prior to the decision?
It was on the day, but on the day, it was merely a culmination of what we had been discussing over time, where we were discussing the actual role of the minister in terms of the powers provided by the Constitution, something that we were doing on a regular basis in our meetings. And I did hold a number of meetings with Advocate Piccoli, not only on this subject, but on other relevant matters, especially taking advantage that I have a special advisor who happens to be an advocate, which was a coincidence that doesn't necessarily obtain with all other special advisors.
Minister, if I may interject, I'm not sure whether you touched on the issue of Advocate Piccoli in passing only, or whether that's where you intend to be in your statement, because I would like to refer you to your next chapter, which you have headed Human Rights Concerns Emanating from the Public. I think the issues that you deal with under that heading are important in considering your eventual decision to disband. So I think we should take some time and you highlight aspects of that. For the record, commissioners, the extensive engagement with the issue of consultation with Advocate Piccoli starts much later in your statement at 162. And when we get there, you will say more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. During the latter half of 2024, that is just after we got appointed to the Ministry of Police, we began receiving a series of complaints and reports from civil society as one group, from whistleblowers, from SAPS members, from members of parliament, and from members of the public. These reports raise concerns about human rights abuses by members of the National Political Killing Stars team, among others. They raise concerns also around issues of governance, failures affecting various temporary and ad hoc task teams. And those included, but not limited to the NPKTT. They were raising issues across SAPS, especially on task teams. They formed part of broader pattern of structural issues within SAPS that required ministerial attention. The complaints from various complainants varied in content and in emphasis, but they shared common themes, namely unmonitored task team operations resulting in grave human rights abuses, as they alleged. Unclear reporting lines in terms of who do these task teams report, and allegations of overreach, duplication functions, and significant strain on SAPS resources. It was clear to me that most of these complaints arose from people who knew one or two things about police, who felt a concern of one kind or the other around issues of policing in the country. Now, I need to add that they also included HR-related matters or complaints alleging some internal abuses within police, including within PKTT, and instances of criminality. Now, for the benefit of the Commission, I provided a list of some of the people, and I indicate, for instance, on 731 that one of the people who lodged a complaint was Lieutenant General Samson Shitlabana, whose complaints arose from his transfer from SAPS to the National Assembly. And there were some HR issues that arose there, and the issue was settled. We entertained it. I allocated Deputy Minister Matale to deal with the matter, and he dealt with it, and it got settled. And the National Commissioner was involved in the discussions throughout. And then there was Gerald Tio, to whom I allocated Deputy Minister Boshielo, and the matter got finalized. And then there were other people. You'll be a bit patient with me as I try to indicate the status of each of the complaints. Major General D. Moodley, who was component head of crime intelligence. Now, he made several calls. Ultimately, I met him, just myself, and he then outlined his complaints. And at the end of the session, I asked him, which was not a long meeting, I asked him, what do you want me to do with what you are saying? He said, I'm not expecting anything from you. I'm just reporting my matter is in court, and I want to settle it myself, independent of you, in court. And that's why we left his matters. And then there was Brigadier Hlungwane, who was in charge of the secret account. His argument was that after all processes internally, he was indicating that he is on appeal to the minister. And then there was also General Khan, and I must say that that matter is still pending. And then there was an issue of General Khan, whose matter I got through a National Commissioner and Head of Crime Intelligence. That matter ended up in court with a challenge from General Khan, challenging expeditious handling of his matters, and he won the case, and there was an internal disciplinary hearing which cleared him as well. And that's how the matter was handled. And then there was also General Vuma, whose matter is still pending on suspension for several years now. And the Mpumalanga Provincial Commissioner, Lieutenant General Manamela, whose matter is still pending. And then other names to be submitted to the commissioners for confidentiality. I have here commissioners in this envelope. Other people who contacted us, and some of them we had a discussion on with the deputy ministers somewhere towards the end of November to say, what do we do with all these complaints? But many of them, or most of them, I met them alone at their request for strict confidentiality, because they emphasized throughout our conversations. So they would call and they will ask for a meeting directly or via other people. And then I would meet them, and they would emphasize that the matters that they are relating to me are highly confidential and highly sensitive. And then they would relate them to me. I did that throughout the course to the end of the year. And I put them in the envelope, and I would want to I intended handing them over personally to the commissioners, but I trust that you are trusted by the commission, and I'll be looking at you as you do so, because I don't want the names to be exposed by any accident. I am making a personal appeal to the commission to afford them an opportunity to meet them. There are 8 of them, and it won't take 8 days. It will take less than 8 days to hear them out. And it's important from where I sit to receive or to afford them the opportunity to do so. So that is part one of the complaints that we received. Then there were also complaints.
Minister, my apologies if I may interject. From a procedural perspective only, this is important for me to understand at the stage where now we engage the minister on his testimony, not having had sight of what's contained in the envelope, because it's strictly for the chair's eyes at the moment. I would like to know whether the minister is tendering the contents of that envelope in support of this particular heading, because if he is, then I would not have had opportunity to consider its contents, or whether he is just submitting those names for the commissioners to consider how to treat the persons whose names are contained in the envelope, and that whatever it is they say is unnecessary for purposes of our engagement as far as this chapter is concerned. Not having seen them, I don't want to stray way beyond the minister's statement as it currently stands. So I would like some guidance on how to treat the information that is in the envelope. And Minister, I'm not suggesting that I have sight of the contents. I just want to know how I deal with the contents of that envelope. Thank you.
We'll discuss over lunch and we'll decide how to go about how we want to treat this.
Thank you, Chair. Duly guided.
Thank you. Just one more additional information. I did provide their numbers because I ended up just recording, because sometimes they would phone you in the car and I would take the name and surname and then number. But quite a number of them, if not all of them, would have made submissions to or an application to the commission to appear. So there may be correspondence with the commission already from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Noted.
The next person who also lodged complaints formally by writing emails to us was Meriti Haas, who is an academic and a long-standing observer of policing oversight in KwaZulu-Natal and elsewhere. And she did send correspondence to me and to Parliament Portfolio Committee on policing from time to time, complaining about various issues. Among the issues that she raised was systemic governance weaknesses experienced or observed by her in policing, including task team operating in parallel, and sometimes outside sub-formal command, oversight and budget structures. Her concerns outlined the issues later identified independently in the Marai report and SAP's internal governance discussions. Some of these complaints were quite serious when you read them. And at some point, I did have a discussion with National Commissioner around these matters. I'm just indicating that she was one of the people who made submissions. And then there was another person called Patricia Morgan Mashale, who also sent a number of complaints on an ongoing basis, I think from July, shortly after we got appointed, sending a lot of material to us on a regular basis. And at some point, I requested assistance to understand exactly her standing and what her role is, and so on. But even after IGI, that is Inspector General of Intelligence, had indicated some aspects around her, I continued to receive and I continued to read. But I never actually sat down to deal with the matters that she was raising. I never sat down with her, nor did I have any discussion with her on telephone. I just received and looked and read what she was saying. And then the third and the last issue of these complaints arises from a Forte case that is alleged to be in violation of human rights. This was reported in media before I arrived, as I perused matters from attorneys from Bradley, Conrad, Halton, Chiclaw firm. And some of these articles were carried by Daily Maverick. And we set out and indicate what they were all about. And I proposed that I don't go through everything there. But those matters are clearly identified. It is now public knowledge, now on page 35, that Ms. Becker has since requested to give evidence before the Madlanga Commission about what she alleges as abuse and violation of her rights perpetuated by members of the NPKTT during her arrest. In her statement before the Commission, Ms. Berger has detailed an extent of the abuse as she alleges she endured during her arrest, and Ms. Berger explains the abuse she experienced in Part B of her statement, paragraph 31 to 79, which I attached as SM16. So it bears mention that some of these complaints referred to in this statement were also discussed with the National Commissioner, as I indicated. Now, the challenge posed by these examples is this. The National Political Killings Task Team has for some time been credibly accused of systematic human rights violations. And I must indicate that it's quite concerning to hear stories here and there of members of PKTT or National Political Killings Task Team wearing balaclavas when they do some of the operations that you wouldn't expect them to do so, even though I'm not specific on the matters, but I'm merely indicating what complainants have raised in their complaints, the ones that are listed there. A culture that is not in consonant, in my view, with a democracy and what is expected of police, and it's quite concerning. Hence, my inclusion of this matter here. So my view is, and still is, it is possible for police, whether in units, whether in teams, to perform their duties successfully without having to violate any human rights. We are a country that has made a choice that we recognize human rights, that is rights of individuals in the country that must be observed as we police South Africa all the time. But I'm not suggesting that police shouldn't have freedom to or liberty to exercise their powers within the Constitution and within acceptable practices in relation to use of force whenever that is necessary. Now, I go further to say that I do have an understanding that there are arguments out there that it's preferable to keep the National Political Killings Task Team because of its unique focus and ability to combat organized crime. And I want to state it that that's a wrong argument, because the National Political Killings Task Team was not designed to combat organized crime in general, but they were established and designed to focus on political killings, which, in other words, killings which are politically related. And they have been doing that strictly just that, political killings or assassinations or murders that are deemed to be political related, not other matters, not any other matter, as it were. And I will indicate later through figures or some stats that make an effort to make us understand what the Political Killings Task Team was all about. But I don't think that it is fair to devote substantial resources to one category of killings in the country, which is politically related killings and not any other killing. when the evidence is that there is an urgent need to focus on all matters. Ever since I got, or we got appointed to the ministry, what the concern of cabinet has been, the concern of the portfolio committee has been, the concern of the public has been, it has been a very high and unacceptable rate of murder in South Africa. That has been the concern. That has been drummed into our heads all the time, and we believe in that the rate of murders alone, not just crime, but murders in particular, is very high, unacceptably so. That's why, among other things, I took the initiative of calling a meeting together with the deputy ministers of the National Commissioner in November and provincial commissioners and the deputy national commissioners, just to focus on 4 crimes that we believed by that time we had observed as being a major concern in the country. That is murders, proliferation of firearms, proliferation of, if I could use that word, of drugs in the country, and GBV&F. We focused on those only. Now, those kinds of situations or those crimes, as we identified them in November, they rather dictate to your conscience and yourself as a need, pointing to a need, maybe not exclusively, but almost exclusively, that you need to attend to those because they are the ones who characterize criminality in South Africa more than any other. When people say there's crime in South Africa, they're pointing to murders. They are pointing to these other 3 that I've indicated. Hence, our focus. Much as political killings, as identified in 2018, are important, there is murders of councillors and other officials at the local sphere. Much it is important, and it was important to attend to that. But there is a need to recognize that outside that number or that category of people, there is a lot that is happening. And therefore, we can't keep on focusing on just one category, which in my view is small compared to the other, as statistics will indicate. I then proceed to try to get deeper into the changes that were necessary and necessitated by the directive that I issued on the 31st of December last year.
Where are you now, Minister, in your statement?
I'm on paragraph 99. I'm proceeding to paragraph 99. A central consideration that informed my approach was the need to strengthen SAP's permanent structures rather than continue to rely on a temporal project. And this was based on observations. So by late 2024, it was increasingly clear that concentrating significant resources exclusively on politically motivated matters was no longer efficient or justifiable. Relative to the national burden of violent crime, political killings constitute a small proportion, and a broader systemic consideration was required. Now, by saying this, I do not mean that there is no need to focus on political killings. But I'm simply making the point that for me, the disproportionate spend on the country's resources for political killings, while other systematic murders are ignored, can never be justified. What I wanted to achieve and still do is a balanced approach to crime fighting, particularly where matters are concerned. If I could pause and just indicate three things about the landscape of matters in South Africa. One, it is to that, according to the Global Initiative, in the report they issued last year in April, they identify 4 categories of assassinations or murders in the country, that is in South Africa. One, it is organized crime that takes the largest portion of lives in the country. And they estimate it to 35% of murders in the country. This is followed by assassinations or murders within the taxi or around the taxi industry, which is estimated around 34%, which is a percent lower than the organized crime. And then this is followed by the third category, which is political killings, estimated at 24%. And the last one is personal killings, which is estimated at 7%. Now, if you put aside the global initiative and look at your own stats in South Africa of murders, they definitely fall within those four categories, by and large, which means that the highest category of murders in the country are those flowing from organized crime, whether it is extortion, whether it is in any other form, followed by taxi industry-driven or murders associated with the taxi industry, and political killings in the third category. This is the first point that I want to make in terms of the landscape. The second point I want to make is that there are 4 provinces that constitute about 83% of murders in the country. 4 provinces. It is Gauteng, where we are. It is KwaZulu-Natal. It is the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. Those 4 provinces combined constitute continuously 83% of murders in the whole country. Now, so when they say South Africa has a high murder rate, unacceptably high murder rate, in fact, in terms of figures, we are talking about murders that occur in these 4 provinces. I'm not saying that it excludes the other provinces, but I'm just saying up to 83% just in the 4 provinces, all combined. Now, I now want to indicate in figures, I'm not sure whether I did ask that these figures, because it's for the benefit of the public to clarify these points as clearly as possible. I don't know whether I did that. If I did, I would request that these statistics be displayed as I go through them.
Minister, I think that the request had not made it through to us, but that shouldn't be a challenge. We will be able to project from your statement as we have it. Just so I understand, where you have statistics appearing at page 38.
Yes.
And spilling over into 39. Firstly, under which paragraph, which statistics would you like to have projected?
I will just take the
101, paragraph 101,
yes.
101 or 102? 101.
101 first and then 102. And then I would request that I also take that graph on page 40. Okay.
We shall do so. If you could just give us a second. In the meantime, you can continue with your testimony as soon as, I think we're up and running.
Okay.
Just give it a second. Where's your? Not so soon, it turns out.
Okay, thank you.
But I believe you may continue as soon as it comes up. Then you will turn your attention to the table.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at the end of the statistics that we will indicate, which will also take us to some of the figures that we have on PKTT figures, as we'll be comparing the summary of that comes out of these figures and the graph. It tells you that between the years 2016-17 and 2024-25, SAPS recorded an average of 23,043 murders per year national. 23,000 and 43,000. No, 23,000 and 43 national. And then you go to KZN alone, the average there annually is 5,314. Now, this against the backdrop of the National Political Killings Task Team murders with an average of 18 political murders per year over years 2015 up to 2024. We were just indicating averages to make my earlier point after the statistics. I may as well, because stats are now here, to indicate what I wanted to indicate. So in one, you will see that from 2011 to 2015, we deliberately went back there to show that in those 4 years, political murders were 11. This was before the establishment of PKTT. And then there are other categories like politically related cases and political related cases and so on, the total. But I want to jump to 2018 in the interest of time, the year of establishing, or the year in which PKTT was established. There were 14 murders. And then 2019, 15 murders, 2020, 15 murders, 17, 27, 11, and by 2024, you were talking about 7 murders because the graph went down in 2023 of politically motivated murders down to 11 and then to 7. Now, 102. Now, 102 indicates just in KZN, flowing from those figures above, to indicate that in those years, political, I mean, not political matters in KZN. You are talking about between 2011 and 2012, 2012, and then 2015 to 2016, you are talking about 18,396. Now, you compare, as I say, with the figure above, which indicates politically motivated matters, 11 and 18,000, in other words. Now, I'm not even taking those of the country, which is 85,000 at that time. But let's go to 2018, because that 18,000 is a combination of years, but I'm now taking 1 year. 2018, in KZN, there were 4,382 murders. Just to continue referring to the stats. In that year, in 2018, you had 14 that were political, that were identified as political. Just 14. But these are lives, of course, and I shouldn't even add just. It's 14 lives that were. But outside politically motivated, you had 4,014, 2018. Now 2019-20, it's 4,859. And there were 15 murders in 2019. 2020, there were again 15 murders, political, in terms of politically motivated. But in the same year, in KZN, you had 4,859. Now, 2020 to 2021, 4,825. 2021, so the whole figure goes like that. But this side, by then, the combined figure is 27,494. Now, let's go to the graph, which is on page 40. Now, that is the graph that indicates murders over time in the country. So the top line is murders in the country as a whole. The next line, murders in KZN over time. And the red line is politically motivated murders. So just the same as I've been saying, 2016-17 is 32 against 40,000, and 4,018 against that 19,000. And then you go 20 in 2017-18 against 4,382. And then 14 against 4,395. And then in 2019-20, 15,000 against 4,000. 2020-21, 15,000 against 4,825. And then 2021-2022, 17 against 6,000, which was even rising. And then in 2023 is 27, the highest. And then 2023-24, it started dropping to 11, and then down to 7. Now, we then say there, in summary, the figures demonstrate that politically related matters constitute a very small proportion of the national murder burden, and even the provincial murder rate in KZN, where PKTT or NPKTT operates. Now, this supported my view that focusing significant resources exclusively on political killings through ad hoc temporal task teams was no longer sustainable, and that the expertise developed within the National Political Killings Task Team should be mainstreamed into permanent murder and robbery unit, which has political killings in its approval mandate as indicated on Tuesday, backed by our structure. Now, by way of further illustration, it is to be noted that SAPS releases quarterly crime stats, but for murders in particular, there is no breakdown on or categorization of the motives of the murder. Indeed, I would argue that motive is of secondary significance. What is important to note, and in terms of our mandate, is to reduce murders, is to deal with murders, whether of business people or from the religious community or from whatever category, that is secondary. What is primary? What you get paid for, where you earn your title as minister, and in my case, as an individual, as minister, is our performance in relation to the face of criminality in South Africa, face of crime in South Africa, which is the murder rate, not murder rate of a certain category of people in the country, but murder rate. And people in South Africa would say, we are making an impact, we are working, not when we reduce just one category, but across. And this is in line with the Constitution of the Republic, because it doesn't distinguish which category, whose murder is important than which one. Now against this, which we had to really ask the question internally in our consciences, do we continue like that? So it was also my general understanding that in reality, as I indicated before, task teams are created to solve defined problems and not to operate indefinitely. And I've repeatedly indicated this matter. Now, ultimately, I was of the view that NPKTT's work should be wound down or wind up, and members should then be absorbed into one of the permanent structures. And in this case, it is murder and robbery under serious and violent crimes, which flows from the work study, which flows from the understanding of SAPs themselves, and the work that they had done over years, and so on. Now, when I then indicated in the directive that NPKTT is no longer serving the main concern, in other words, no longer addressing the main concern, and I put it as no longer required, it was based on the disjuncture that I was feeling internally, that in reality there is a disjuncture, and it's backed by figures. If you don't interrupt what is happening, you are actually saying this disjuncture must continue when you have power to exercise in the form of a directive to highlight the importance and the urgency to deal with this particular matter, hence the directive. So it was not out of not recognizing the work done by the PKTT, despite the fact that, as I have indicated, it's a small category of people in reality. But we do recognize the work that they did as individuals and as a team. But time to mainstream, as indicated by the structures of SAPs over time, had come. And we had to take a stand to say, let's now change in line with what is actually happening in the country in terms of murder and robbery. So it was in that context that I indicated no longer required. It was based on stats, not meaning to say individual members within PKTT would then be made to retire. It was time to mainstream them and go to murder and robbery and even use some of the experience acquired there to mainstream, especially in the 4 provinces, as I've indicated. And I still believe very strongly that we should persuade one another in the country that we mainstream, because reality is pointing elsewhere. Much as we can sense, what is this? It is to sentimentalize and
or sensationalize.
Sensationalized. The chair is very helpful, and I'm indebted to you, Chair. We should work beyond the emotions on this matter. Try to persuade us beyond emotions, and sensationalizing the matter. Go beyond that. Now, as I said there, I said to myself, do I play into those emotions, or I face reality? And where is this going to put me personally if I deal with this matter? Because I would be seen to be swimming against the general sentiment. There, I'm sure I'm getting it correctly. I would be seen to be swimming against the sentiment, general sentiment. But I said to myself, I don't believe that I was appointed for sentiment. I believe that I was appointed for honesty and for reality, as I see it in the portfolio, and then lead accordingly. So ultimately, then, we wrote in the way, in the manner that we wrote. So I've dealt with everything on page 41.
Yes, I confirm.
Is it we or I, Minister? When you say we wrote in the manner that we wrote?
I'm a humble person, Commissioner. I must say I, because I was really alone. So that I don't, the word we, I normally use because I'm with deputy ministers, but it is important to indicate that I didn't consult them in writing. But I have a hangover of we, but I was alone in this.
Minister, before you proceed, Chair, I see it's about 1 o'clock. However, if we turn a page to 43, just I think a few aspects for the Minister to wrap up this sub-topic. And I would request perhaps a minute or two for that purpose, and we then may break before he deals with the question of resource and budgetary considerations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will deal with paragraph 112 just for its relevance, because it talks about the former requests. It talks about requests. I beg your pardon. Let me start with 111. There is a difference between the request for extensions leading up to 2022 and the request for financial approval in the absence of a concurrent request for an extension post-2022. For an example, the request for approval and request for funding for the period 2018-7 to 2020 December 31, and the period 2019 September to 2020 March 31. And there is a vast difference between the two, between these requests. The former category, the old ones, the request for extension, they are specific and detailed in their purpose, background, operational approach, composition relating to the task team in question, and estimated expenditure is reflected. On the other hand, the latter, that is beyond 2022, they were done without a concurrent request for extension submitted in the same function. They were simply requests for financial authority. There's a difference. You would read pages and pages in the older ones before you come to the finance part or the funding part. But post-2022, almost the second page, it's a request for funding. So those extensions got reduced to just request for finance. And these differences are discernible. But I'm a resident of KZN. And I'm conversant with matters there, political and otherwise. And even without the benefit of any study or figures, the general conversation in KZN by the end of 2024 was that political killings are down. They were no longer part of the conversation as they were in 2018 and a couple of years after that, and general consensus that you would find in the normal course of conversations will tell you so, without any studies and without any figures. So 113 says mere approvals for funding are to be distinguished from formal extensions of the National Political Killings Task Team, and there is, to date, no work study contemplating that the National Political Killings Task Team should be transformed into a permanent structure intended to operate indefinitely. What there is instead, there is a proposal over years that you now must integrate, you now must allow National Political Killings Task Team to be absorbed by murder and robbery under serious and violent crimes. This is what we are saying in those paragraphs. But we are also highlighting sensitivity in terms of allocating resources within policing, that it's a matter of concern and it's very important. So I go to paragraph 115. So following the work study, the intention was always that the NPKTT functions would be reabsorbed into permanent structures. Let me make this point. It may have been conveyed and received as disbandment and consumed as such, but the intention is similar to that one of 115, absorbed into these permanent structures as demonstrated in terms of what SAPS were saying in various memos over time. It was to absorb, it was to integrate, it was to do just that. But the term disband came in, of course, in the conversations right from 2019. It was not introduced by me alone. It was there in 2024 before I arrived. And as such, it got to be part of the conversation. Now, so that's why I'm saying then in those paragraphs preceding where I am, we're getting to the belly or this real substance that went into the processing of the letter of disbandment. But I proceed to the resources and budgetary considerations, and I'm not going to be detailed there because it's there. I've spoken about it, except to say that allocation of resources, I consider it to be
Minister,
policy making.
Oh, Minister, I had understood Ms. Silo to say that you should stop
At this
just before starting with resources and budgetary considerations. Let us... yes.
Before we do so, Commissioner Kumalo's mic went on. I thought he's got a question for the minister. Oh, all right. Otherwise, happy to. Thank you, Chair.
Let us adjourn and resume at 2 p.m.
Thank you.